Most men believe that vulnerability is weakness. Wherever we go, there's an expectation that we feel that we need to be a certain way in order to find love, acceptance, belonging, etc. We're taught that what it means to be strong is the same thing as hiding our struggles, suppressing our fears, or maintaining an outward image of just having it all together. But what if I told you that this belief is not only wrong, it's the very thing that is destroying your potential in your relationships. It is preventing you from being charismatic and connecting authentically. It is killing your confidence and keeping you stuck in cycles of shame, isolation, and addiction. In this video, I'm going to take you through a private workshop that I recently did with the men inside of my Orbital Recovery program. We're going to tear down this lie about vulnerability piece by piece. By the end of this workshop, you'll have a completely new framework. You'll understand the crucial difference between unattractive weakness and profound, magnetic, charismatic strength. And you'll know exactly how to lead with authenticity in your life and relationships, especially when it feels most difficult. Grab a pen and paper or somewhere to jot down a few notes as you go through this video. You're gonna need it. Let's get into it. All right, so let's dive in. This workshop is centered around vulnerability, authenticity, leadership, and the relationship between these things. This is at the absolute core of problems that we are facing today as men, especially in romantic relationships. We have this crippling fear of showing weakness, and we mistakenly believe that weakness and vulnerability are the same thing. Plot twist, they're not. So first, I want to define what authenticity actually means. So when you hear that word, I want you to take a moment, feel free to pause the video, and write down what comes to mind. What components of self-expression is authenticity composed of? Now, when I asked this question to my students, I got answers back like honesty, congruence, genuine, sincere, and all of these are great. They're all pieces of authenticity or aspects of it or things that sit close to it. But I want to give you a complete model. Now, Brené Brown, who wrote the best book on shame that I've ever read, Daring Greatly, calls the experience of being authentic wholeheartedness. So we can use this as a North Star to understand what the experience of being authentic feels like. Now, I believe that authenticity has 4 core components, and they are this. 1, honesty. 2, vulnerability. 3, relatability. And 4, congruence. Now, let's break these down. Honesty is fairly simple, but it's not the same thing as vulnerability. Honesty is the capacity to communicate the truth, full stop. Is there a one-way road from your inner experience to your mouth? Or do you have a marketing department up here that every single thing that you feel, every opinion that you have, every behavior that you want to execute has to go up and get modified by marketing and PR before it gets the approval in order to achieve some kind of specific reaction or outcome among the people that you're around? Honesty is the ability to communicate the truth of what you feel, what you want, what your opinions are, overall the reality of who you are as a person and what your experience is. Honesty is not about saying what we think other people want us to say or doing what we think will make other people like us. Now, vulnerability is where you put real skin in the game. It's not just about honestly stating facts. It's about expressing a depth of genuine, honest emotion where your true self can finally be seen. People can be honest while not being vulnerable. There's a difference. And now the next 2 are where most people get things wrong. First, congruence. Are your words, are your tone, and are your body language all communicating the same thing? Congruence is easier to understand when you see what incongruence looks like first. So let me give you an example. Let's say somebody comes up to me and they ask me, "Hey Nate, do you want to go take out the trash?" And I say, "Yeah, sure." My words said, "Yeah, sure," but my energy, my facial expression, my tonality screamed, "I absolutely do not want to take out the trash, and I feel resentful that you just asked me that question." That's a great example of what is meant when scientists or researchers tell us that 90-something% of communication is nonverbal. By intentionally being incongruent, I communicated an enormous amount of emotional information about my state and my relationship to the request. A congruent response where my words, my facial expressions, and my feelings actually lined up would be something more like this. Hey, Nate, do you want to take out the trash? Honestly, no, but I'll do it anyway. Do you see the difference that congruence made in my communication? My words and my state were aligned. And finally, the most important and most misunderstood piece of authenticity is relatability. Authenticity is not a free license to insecurity and trauma dump on everyone you meet. Connection, you see, is like a bridge between two people. What is going to happen if I send a 60-ton tank across a wooden bridge? It will break. You have to be aware of the strength of the connection between you and the other person, of how much trust and rapport you have built to understand what the bridge between the two of you can actually hold. So, for example, when I meet people, if I'm out socializing and they ask what I do, I don't immediately jump into saying, like, oh, I'm a pornography addiction recovery coach. Typically, I'll say something like, oh, I run a business. Then they might get a little bit more curious and then they might ask me, oh, well, like, what kind of business do you do? With how they are investing in me with that question, they're strengthening the bridge. They are saying, I want the bridge between us to carry more than the information that you just sent across. So with that, I go one step deeper. I will say something like, I run a men's personal development and addiction recovery program. And then they might still be curious and ask once more, oh man, like what kind of program, what kind of addiction? Here, requesting once more that more be sent across the bridge that is forming between us, I will share one step deeper. And I'll say something like, I focus on helping guys who are struggling with pornography addiction. And then the usual response is, oh, wow, that's so interesting. How'd you get into that? Now, I don't immediately jump off again and say, oh, well, I was, sexually abused when I was a kid and I was raised in this environment and my parents divorced and, oh, I had all these problems growing up and like this, that, and the other thing. I was suicidal when I was a teenager because of this problem. Like that is way too much. So what do I say to make it relatable? I'll say something like this. Yeah, I was exposed to it when I was really young and I struggled with it for a long time. I finally got the help that I needed and now I'm turning around to help other men do the same. Do you see the difference in the relatability aspect between those? Every single one of the statements that I could have made was honest, it was the truth, it was vulnerable, it's putting real skin in the game, and it was congruent. But the variable that I adjusted between the sort of trauma dumping bombshell and the one that felt more appropriate was the relatability. And this is where most men go wrong. They either share nothing at all or they'll share everything at the wrong time with the wrong people in the wrong way. So now we're going to jump into a vulnerability assessment really quick. I want you to do a quick exercise, and this is where the pen and paper or whatever else you're using to write down is going to come in handy. I want you to take the next 2 minutes or so, pause the video, and I want you to write down the list of 3 to 5 things that feel the most vulnerable for you to share in your life. What feels like you are putting the most skin in the game when you speak about it or share it with another person? Where would somebody's judgment or negative reaction to you feel the most painful? Go ahead and pause the video now and write down your list. I'll be here when you get back. Okay, now I want you to look at your list. And if I had to guess, it probably includes things like your struggles, your imperfections, your fears, ways that you feel out of control, ways you feel like you don't have it all together, addictions, bad habits that you haven't been able to overcome, etc. And I know this because I put you in a trap and you didn't even know it. I asked what makes you feel vulnerable, and instinctively, I almost 100% guarantee that you wrote down exclusively negative things, things that you perceive as a weakness. What I just revealed to you, if you look over that list and you see that everything is negative, is the cultural conditioning that has taught you as a man that vulnerability is synonymous with weakness. But here's the plot twist where I want to show you that vulnerability and weakness are not the same thing. In my years of doing this work myself and working with others in pornography addiction recovery, trauma healing, dating relationships, socializing, what I've seen is that what usually is more scary to somebody than sharing their weakness, what feels more vulnerable, is actually expressing positive things. For example, your actual uninhibited joy, how excited you are about something, how genuinely excited you are about something, how much you love something that maybe nobody else around you gets, how passionate you are about your mission or some aspect of your life, what you truly want to achieve in your life. And most of all, how deeply you love and how deeply you care about somebody. And this distinction that I just laid out for you is why all of this conversation about, oh no, as a man, you should never be vulnerable with your girlfriend or your wife just drives me up a wall. Because when I hear somebody say, never be vulnerable with your wife or your girlfriend or she'll leave you, what they're actually revealing is their own complete misunderstanding of vulnerability. What they're basically saying is never show genuine joy, passion, attraction, desire, or deep love for your girlfriend or your wife. That is insane. Your ability as a man to take secure ownership of your desire, to express it, to act on it without apology or seeking permission, is the masculine force that polarizes her into her feminine energy so she can feel attraction. It requires vulnerability for you to do that. There is no meaningful connection with anybody in our life without vulnerability. And the very interesting thing is that whenever you give somebody an example of somebody being vulnerable, truly vulnerable, and you ask them, how did you receive, or what was it like for you to see this person being vulnerable? And the things that come up are usually things like inspiring, or courageous, or strong, but never weak. You see, vulnerability, when expressed in a relatable and congruent way, actually garners respect. It does not lose it. The bottom line is that you cannot build meaningful connection in your life without vulnerability. But now, here's another sort of plot twist, because there is a missing ingredient here that goes with vulnerability in order to achieve this outcome. And this is where we're going to distinguish vulnerability from weakness. Here's where the nuance comes in, because it is true that expressing certain kinds of weakness can be very unattractive and respect destroying inside of particularly romantic relationships. A very important thing for you to understand about romantic relationships is that they are conditional. They are a place where unconditional love can happen, but that love will not keep a romantic relationship together. There are other conditions that must be met for a romantic relationship to continue to exist. And in a masculine-feminine dynamic, the masculine partner has the responsibility of providing leadership to the relationship. To use a kind of job application analogy here, when you as a man are applying for, if you will, a romantic relationship, you are applying for a position which has two roles, lover and leader. And now this is the key that I want you to walk away with today. I'll make it simple and then we'll dive into it in a little bit more depth. The absence of leadership turns vulnerability into weakness. The presence of leadership transforms vulnerability into profound strength. Now, let me show you what this means and what this looks like. Let's take the porn addiction example. You could reveal it to a girlfriend or a partner with a panicked, like wounded puppy kind of energy, like you're a bug that is about to be squashed by life. You could be in tears, like terrified of their reaction, projecting this energy of like, oh my gosh, I'm so broken and I'm so unlovable, like please don't leave me. But you see, while what you did here may have been honest and it may have been vulnerable, you made her responsible for your emotional state and your sense of worth. You see, when men communicate vulnerability like this, what are they actually saying in the sub-communication around it? Remember what we talked about when I was speaking of congruence. The connection between the reality of the vulnerability and how the man feels about it and communicates about it is communicating, I'm afraid of you seeing this part of me. If you're in a romantic relationship, what you have essentially just communicated to the woman that you're with is, I'm afraid of a 115-pound girl judging me. What you have done when communicating your vulnerability like this is put the woman in a nearly impossible situation. Why? She is relying on you, as we said earlier, to be the leader in the relationship. She needs to feel safe. You just showed her that you are afraid of a 115-pound girl. You're afraid of your 115-pound girlfriend. How is she supposed to trust you as a man if you're afraid of her? You revealed that for the entire time that you were together, You were hiding something from her because you were afraid. But it's deeper than that, because you've also revealed that you are afraid of yourself. You're so afraid of your own fears that you couldn't express them to somebody who supposedly loves you. This is why so many men will say, I was vulnerable in my relationship and then she left me. You didn't realize that you started the relationship inside of a frame of weakness that was later revealed, which said, I'm afraid of my girlfriend and I'm afraid of myself. It just took her time to discover that. That's why it lost respect, and that's why she left. And then beyond that, you've also communicated, I'm not able to take ownership or leadership of this part of myself securely because I'm afraid of myself. And here's the problem. If you're afraid of her and you're afraid of yourself, how can the woman that you're with ever feel safe with you and ever feel like she could trust you? Now, what do I mean by that? If you're afraid of a 115-pound girl, you're afraid of her, how can she ever trust you to protect her from things in life that are far worse than a 115-pound girl? And again, how can she trust you when you're afraid of yourself? That, my friends, is what weakness looks like. It was never the vulnerability, it is the frame that you have wrapped it in. This is the kind of vulnerable expression that results in romantic relationships detonating. It is when the man is vulnerable, but he does so through a frame where he communicates that he is afraid of both his girlfriend and her reaction or her judgment, and he's afraid of himself. In doing so, he has completely abdicated the role of leader in the relationship and put her in that position, which is not the conditions under which she wants to be in a romantic relationship, or beyond that, beyond just wanting to be in a romantic relationship, that she can be in a romantic relationship. The framing around vulnerability is where respect is gained or lost. It's never the vulnerability itself. To prove that, let's use the counterexample. Again, relating to a pornography addiction. If I am having a discussion about that with a girl that I'm dating or in a relationship with, I might say something like this instead. Yeah, I was exposed to pornography when I was pretty young, and it took a lot from me. It took me through some of the darkest parts of my life, honestly, and it took me a lot of work to get it out of my life and find the freedom that I now have. The journey of my recovery was extremely challenging, but it really turned me into the man that I am today, and as strange as it sounds, I wouldn't trade it for anything. And so, in a way, I'm actually kind of grateful that I had this problem. Do you feel the difference between those two things? Same vulnerability, completely different energy. One communicates, I'm afraid of you and I'm afraid of myself. The other communicates, I'm not afraid of you. I'm not afraid of what you'll think of the dark parts of who I am. I take responsibility for everything in my life, and I'm moving forward no matter what. Do you see the difference between those two frames around the expression of vulnerability? The same vulnerable fact. One is projected as a weakness. I'm afraid of you finding this out. The other is framed in leadership and secure ownership. And this brings us to this kind of strange paradox to realize you can actually be secure about your insecurities. You can feel leadership through the fact that you have fears and struggles and imperfections. Leadership is not about being perfect or projecting some image of infallibility or perfect strength. It's about radical personal responsibility, and that includes vulnerability. The most trusted and most successful leaders are the ones who are vulnerable with the people that they're leading. They are somebody who stands at the cause of their life as the source of what they are trying to create. It might look like selfishness to a degree from the outside, but I promise you it's actually quite the opposite. A leader asks, what do I like and what do I want? I will move towards it without permission seeking and without apology. What do I dislike and what do I not want? I will set a boundary against it. What helps me and the people that I'm responsible for to become more of who they could be? That is what I'm protecting. What moves me towards my purpose? That is my direction. It is the absence of this internal responsibility, leadership, and direction that makes vulnerability feel like a weakness. The lack of personal responsibility and leadership turns it into this. What do you want? I'll make sure that I'm that so you like me. What do you not want? I'll make sure that I'm never like that so you don't reject me and leave me. What moves you towards what you want, even at my expense? I'll throw myself under the bus in order to make that happen and abandon who I am and my purpose. That's people pleasing, not leadership. Now, let's show you a couple different examples of what vulnerability sounds like when it has radical ownership and leadership, and when it is missing radical ownership and leadership, starting with that one first. Instead of just saying fearfully, I'm struggling with this pattern, you can say confidently, I'm struggling with this pattern and I'm committed to changing it. Instead of saying, I don't have all the answers, you can say, I don't have all the answers and I'm going to keep moving forward. Instead of just saying, I'm scared, you say, or communicate in some other way, I'm scared and I'm doing it anyway. If you take nothing else away from this video, I hope it is this line. You do not have to get rid of your vulnerability. You just need to learn how to surround it with leadership. And here's something fascinating. Studies unequivocally show that vulnerability is universally seen as admirable and inspirational. People respect others who are willing to be vulnerable because it is seen as courageous. It is one of the key elements of fostering deep intimacy and deep, authentic connection with others. But here's the key. When people respect vulnerability, it's because they're seeing vulnerability wrapped in a frame of secure ownership, radical personal responsibility, and leadership. They're seeing somebody who is scared but doing it anyway. Somebody who doesn't have all the answers but is taking responsibility and taking imperfect action anyway. Somebody who is struggling but who is committed to growth and is okay with being seen failing and making mistakes because they know that they'll make progress. That is the vulnerability that creates attraction and respect. Now, here's what I want you to do after this video. First, I want you to audit your relationships. What are you hiding out of fear? What are you afraid of people seeing? Second, I want you to practice adding the frame of secure ownership and leadership around those vulnerabilities. Third, I want you to practice the leadership questions that I mentioned. Leadership sounds and looks like a person who is saying, what do I want? What do I not want? What moves me towards who I'm trying to become? What moves me away from who I'm trying to become? What moves me towards my purpose? And what moves me away from that? And taking actions or setting boundaries accordingly. And now fourth, I want you to start small. Pick one relationship where you can practice vulnerable leadership, and this should be somebody that you trust. I would say probably a good male friend. Don't bring this into a romantic relationship until you've gotten some practice with it. Share something real, but frame it with ownership and forward movement and see what happens. Remember, vulnerability without leadership is what becomes weakness. Leadership without vulnerability is cold and disconnected and results in women who say, I just don't feel like you love me, and I just don't feel like I feel connected to you. The magic happens when you combine them. If this workshop and what we talked about today resonates with you and you want to dive deeper into this work, if you're tired of living behind a mask, of never feeling connected, like you can go into a room full of people who love you and still feel totally alone, if you're struggling with pornography or struggling with authentic relationships, I help men to do this kind of work in my mentorship program. We don't just talk about these concepts, we practice them in real time with other men who understand this journey. Because here's the truth. The opposite of addiction is not sobriety, it's connection. And you cannot have real connection without authentic vulnerability. If you're ready to stop hiding and start leading, go down and click on the link in the description and book a call with me. Let's build the man you were meant to become. Hope you got some value out of this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.